Hi everyone, today we're going to take a look at the TTArtisan 75mm f2 prime lens for Sony E mount. It's also available for the Nikon Z and Leica L mounts. And again, this is a prime lens, so it's a fixed focal length of 75mm with an aperture range from f2 to f16. And full disclosure, I'd like to thank TTArtisans for sending this lens out to me for free to review, but I haven't been paid or sponsored for this video, and as always, I'll give you my honest and fair opinion. Alright, so let's take a closer look at the lens itself, and I think it's a really good looking lens. Very minimalist design. We have a semi-gloss to glossy paint here, and it's all metal with a metal focusing ring and also a metal aperture ring. We have a full metal lens mount here, and then we also have a full metal filter ring here. The thread size here is 62mm, and the lens comes in at 328 grams for the Sony E mount. It's a few grams more for the other mounts in the Z and the L. Now the focusing ring itself is very well dampened, and the aperture ring is clicked, and it's evenly spaced here, so that tells me this is aperture by wire, just like the focusing is also by wire, and it's clicked nicely in thirds of a stop, so I really like that. And then we can go from f2 all the way up to f16, and then we have an auto mode if you want to control the aperture via the camera dials. Now, as of the making of this video, the lens retails for just $199, and for a 75mm f2 prime, that's potentially a real bargain. But of course, there's going to be some compromises made here. Build quality is not one of them. I really like how this lens feels in the hand. I think, the all-metal construction is really nice. That said, the lens hood I'm not so crazy about. It is functional and it works well. You can mount it here on the front. It's a little bit odd design, a little bit squared off, but that's okay. And it is also reversible. But like I said, this lens does feel just a little bit cheap, the lens hood that is. Also, I noticed that there are no function buttons or switches on the lens, and it is not weather sealed. And there's no USB-C port directly on the lens itself to, say, update the firmware. However, the rear lens cap actually doubles as a docking station. There's a little USB-C port here so that you can connect it to your computer and update the firmware that way. And I did check the website to see if there are any new firmware updates for this lens, and there are none. As far as I can tell, this is still on the original firmware when this lens was released. The lens cap is, of course, included. This feels fine. Basic center pinch with TTArtisan logo there on the front, and that's it. There's no lens pouch or lens case or anything included, and I wouldn't expect that at this price point. So here's how the lens looks on my Sony a7R5, and I think it complements the camera very nicely with the white lettering and red accents, just like on the camera itself. Let me pop the lens hood on, just line up the white dots, give it a little turn, and that's how we look here. Now, in terms of handling, it's not a very big lens, so it does balance well with this camera, and the focusing ring is nice and large, and I didn't have any problems manually focusing if I wanted to. However, the aperture ring, even though it is clicked nicely in thirds of a stop, and when I selected an aperture, generally it kind of stayed there. However, typically I just shoot with the aperture ring in A mode and adjust the aperture as needed via the dials. And I found a few times that I'd accidentally bumped the aperture ring to f16 when I didn't intend to. So I wish the aperture ring was just a little bit stiffer so that that wouldn't happen as often, or at least maybe have a locking switch to keep it in A mode, because yeah, that did cause a problem a few times for me. Now, when it comes to the optical performance, I would say this lens is very good, and at this price point, it's excellent with very few compromises. I mean, wide open at f2, the lens is very sharp in the center, all the way out to almost the corners where you do start to see a little bit of softness, and really, you're not going to notice this in your real-life images unless you're shooting brick walls, for example. And when we go to f4, f5.6, f8, the lens is tack sharp, and I would say really it doesn't get soft until you get to almost f16, where diffraction is going to start to set in. Now, the lens does exhibit some minor pincushion distortion, but again, this is easily corrected in post-processing, as you can see here. Now, 75mm being a short telephoto lens makes it ideal for doing portraits, so I wanted to see how the lens rendered the out-of-focus areas, and uses 9 rounded aperture blades. So looking at this image here, I can see that what is in focus and the transition to out of focus is very smooth. Also, the background is very smooth and creamy. The bokeh balls don't exhibit any kind of onion ringing or bubble bokeh effect. However, out to the corners, I do see a little bit of a cat's eye effect, which may or may not be desirable. It's not too bad, and it is difficult to avoid in lenses like this when they're trying to make them as small and compact as possible. Now, there is some slight vignetting in the lens, wide open at f2. I measured about a half a stop, which is, really barely noticeable in the images, and by f5.6 is completely gone. But what was kind of interesting is that as I stopped the lens down, f8, f11, f16, the vignetting kind of reversed, where it started to get a little bit brighter in the corners, again by less than half a stop. But either way, it's barely noticeable and easily corrected in post-processing. Now, when it comes to the chromatic aberrations, again, it's very, very minimal. Even wide open, it's very hard to see, and again, easily corrected in post-processing. Now, when it comes to flaring, I found the lens again to perform very well. It was really only when I pointed into direct sunlight that I could see the flaring directly into the image, losing contrast and getting streaks. But generally speaking, even in bright light, the contrast remained very good, very rich colors. And it really surprised me because TTArtisan lenses in the past, flaring performance was usually their weak point, but they seem to have corrected that here. Now, when it comes to autofocus performance, I found the lens performed very well for me because I did see some other reviews where the autofocus looked kind of slow or sluggish and it was missing focus time to time. But I didn't really run into any of those problems. As you can see from these recorded samples here, I was using animal detect and face detect. I was in AFC, AFS, AFA. I was, recording in stills and in video. And I really had no problems. And through the hundreds, if not thousands, of images that I've taken with this lens, the autofocus was very, very reliable. Now, I will say that one area I did have a little trouble with was when I had a person sort of behind a tree with branches and leaves surrounding them. When I was in wide area focus, the lens did misfocus sometimes on the face. It didn't see the face. And honestly, I would cut the lens a little slack here because, any camera would have trouble with that kind of scenario. So all I did was just change the autofocus from wide area to zone, and then I got 100% lock-in rate onto the face. Now, the 75mm focal length may be a little bit odd to some people because it's not your standard 50mm or 85mm. It's kind of in between, but I like to think of it like the 40mm, which has quickly become a popular focal length. It's not quite as wide as the 35, but it's not as tight as the 50mm either. So this lens is kind of in between, just like that, where it gives you a little more flexibility in your compositions where maybe you don't need to bring the 50 or the 85. You can just use this one, but either way, I think overall TTArtisans has done an excellent job here, especially given the price point. This lens is a bargain, and I can highly recommend it. So that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.